Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the afternoon session. Thank you for joining us. Please welcome to the stage Utah League of Cities and Towns First Vice President, Draper Mayor, Troy Walker.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying yourself. Are you? Yeah. Excellent. I hope you've learned something today. Have you? Yeah. Good, good. I have as well. So I do want to thank our league staff for all the hard work that it takes to put this event on. And I think they've done an excellent job. Let's give them a round of applause, can we? And poor Cameron, you know, he has to do the session and then pretty closely after this. So give Cameron a hand. He's done a great job for us this year. We couldn't be better off. I'm going to treat this after we're done here like a league policy committee meeting, because that's what I've been doing all year for you. So we'll talk about that. But first, before we talk about the future and the legislature and all the joy that is, I'm going to welcome to our stage this afternoon Miss Whitney Phillips, who is from the state. She is the state privacy officer from the Office of the State Auditor. We all like the auditor. Whitney, come on up. And she is going to present an award for a city who has showed excellence in privacy and data protection.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Dr. Whitney Phillips. I am the State Privacy Officer. I am happy to be here today. There was a new law that just passed, HB 491, about privacy. That goes into effect May 1st of this year. This award is not based on compliance of that law that hasn't come into effect yet. Exactly, you're welcome. What this award is based off of is privacy engagement. And I am one of 2 staff members, and you are 250 plus cities and towns. We have not assessed all of you, so do not be offended if you do not get this award. But what I want to do is highlight one city in particular that has been consistently proactive and dedicated to reviewing, assessing, and improving their administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. Privacy, excuse me, privacy is not the job of IT alone. It's a group effort. And so I'm happy to give this award to the city of St. George. Come on up. Sure. As they're coming up, I want to say a few things about this city. And it's not just because we're here, I promise you. I got a phone call, I believe it was May of 2021, from someone from St. George City that said, "Oh no, Whitney, we do not have a privacy policy statement." And I said, "Oh my gosh, there's a city that knows that they don't have a privacy policy statement." Another thing I wanted to mention is St. George, you might not know about this. You were working with a vendor recently, and you told that vendor that they had to delete their data upon termination of the contract. That vendor said, "I'm sorry, we only use our standard terms of service, we're not gonna do it." You told them to kick rocks, I believe was the technical term. And that vendor actually came back and said, "You know, you're right. We're actually gonna change our standard terms of service for the entire state and for all the other states we work with." So just a few examples of how awesome the city of St. George is. Thanks, guys. Like we like each other.
All right, I don't normally need notes, but Cameron has instructed me to keep my language appropriate for age, so I've got some notes. As you know, as the league, it's interesting when you think about what we are when we come together, and what Cameron and what we all like to call ourselves is the League Army. And it really is an army, and it's an effective army. And we've been effective over the years, but we did a really good job this year being a League Army. 247 bills were tracked by our staff this year. That's a lot of bills. I often wish some of these folks would run for office on the platform of I will pass no bills and eliminate 10, but that's not what we got. So. As you look at the legislature when it goes in session and you think about what they're doing in that compressed 45-day window, I think there were 580 total bills. 247 of them directly were important to us as local leaders. And then, of course, the other bills are important as well. But direct impact on the things we do as elected officials, 247. So. I don't know if it's slowing down any. Hopefully, maybe it will. I don't know. One of my council members is running for the House, so I'm hoping to give him some good campaign advice on pass no bills, eliminate a few. I hope he's listening. Anyway, Cameron asked me to give you kind of my perspective this year on our interaction with the legislature. And I have to tell you, it was different. I've been elected official for a pretty long time, both a council member and a mayor. And I've seen the legislature work. One of our representatives for a long time was the Speaker of the House, and I was close to him, and I was in the House Speaker's office a lot and saw it from that perspective. But to take on the perspective of a board officer with all of your trusts, hopes, and dreams on us to make sure that we don't let the legislature really do it to you like they'd like to, it was a different perspective. And to see Cameron and the staff work like they do, and how professional and how well trained and how excellent they are at identifying the issues, breaking down the issues, and providing us information so we can interact and deal with what we're trying to do as elected officials. How many of you did a Slido this year? Okay, I can't see everybody because of the lights, but hopefully if you haven't, you're going to get a chance. How many of you feel like over the course of the last little bit, you've had better data given to you about what's kind of happening as it affects us? Specifically, let's take housing. Do you remember when we crunched last year the numbers on the number of available housing units, entitled units? Does everybody remember that? That was like one of the first big data grabs that we just tried to do as a league board. And I think it was one of the most successful things we've ever done, because what I noticed this year as we gathered that data, and I'm sure you had to participate and provide entitled unit information to Molly or Justin or whoever was asking you. But when we got that data together, when the staff got it together, those numbers, they became talking points, and that was huge. That was huge. We went into the Speaker's office as officers, and the Speaker brought up the numbers. We went into the Senate President's office, and they brought up our numbers, our data, and they were telling it to us. It was awesome. Because before, it's usually we're trying to negotiate and trying to figure out where the data points are. But to have data that we could really just talk about and they could actually say to us, and we're validating, all of your concerns, I can't think of a better thing that we've done. It was fantastic. When we met with the Speaker, obviously housing. Does anybody worry about housing and units and all that? You guys are all good with it? I'm assuming you are. You're not worried about more apartments or any more density. Everybody's good with that. When we met with Speaker Schultz, he said to Cameron and I, said, look, we've done a lot over the last 4 or 5 years as a legislature in this housing space. And we want to let it kind of flow and see where it goes before we do a whole lot more. And for the most part, they kept their word, which I was impressed with. Now, there are a few things that came out in different bills that we all got excited about. But working with the legislature this year, I think, was fairly collaborative, maybe from years past, but it was positive in general, in my opinion. I appreciated the way that Cameron has distributed the duties of our league office, of our league staff, and they have taken charge, and they're excellent people, and they're good at what they do, and they led discussions. I sat in many with different people from our staff that were in charge of different bills, and they were always properly informed, had the right data. And the power of the league, Cameron, Justin, there were a few times when we said, hey, time to text your representatives. And you know what? You folks did. And let me tell you what, it got their attention. I had more than one representative in leadership say to me, if I get another damn text from somewhere, I wasn't supposed to swear much, another damn text from from Salt Lake County resident about gravel or somebody else, I just know what I'm going to do. And I was thinking, that's awesome, because they were getting them, and it gets their attention, and it should, because at the end of the day, they should be listening to the things that we tell them, because we're the boots on the ground, and we're the people who plan our community. So I just overall want to say that I thought it was an excellent session for us as a league. It is different. The legislature's turned over in a lot of ways. It's a different group than we've seen in years past. It's different people, and it's going to continue to turn younger, different voices. And so that's sometimes difficult to try and manage, because you get used to how people are, and as we try to get to know everyone better. But I do want to tell you, as a league member, I think you're getting all the bang for your buck you could hope to get in your dues. I can't think of a way we would, as a local officials or cities, communities, would be able to effectively lobby our legislature like we do as a group. Now, I know a lot of us have our own lobbyists that do some stuff for us as well, but that league army is really quite amazing. And I saw it work this year, and it changed the tide on stuff we didn't like, and some stuff, and it caused negotiation on things we didn't like that we made better. And so if you're sitting here thinking, is it worth it to be in the league? I'm telling you, I think it is. I don't think you can get more for your money than you get with this group. We've got great, like I say, great workers, great people. Our leadership is fantastic. Cameron, he's one of the smartest young lawyers I know, and I think he might have a photographic memory. He's never told me that, but he remembers stuff I said like 2 years ago, which bothers me sometimes. But he's amazing at keeping us on track. So I just want to say, going into this next legislative session, be ready. If you haven't participated in the LPC, if it's not your assignment in your community, maybe make it your assignment. Have an opportunity, because we meet every week and we talk about what's coming up, and we take the position of the league and the heartbeat and the pulse of the league in those meetings. The Slido device is amazing, because it allows us to get data and understand where you guys all are. And it was powerful this year to be able to go off and negotiate and move forward. So if you haven't been to an LPC, come, get into one, see what we do, see how your colleagues work. We're all working together, and it's really quite amazing. But I just want to again say thank you for attending our convention, this convention this year, and look to see in the fall. But I think it's the biggest attendance we've had ever in history. So give yourself a round of applause for that. It's amazing. I'm now going to do what I did in every LPC meeting, which is turn it over to Justin, who's going to tell you what's really going on. So anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Walker, and thank you all for being here today. Huge crowd out here, and so we're grateful to have you all here. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened in this last legislative session. We're going to talk a little bit about the Olympics. Back in the day, we had Noel Picus Pace here this morning. And then everybody's favorite thing, we would not have a meeting without it. We're going to ask you a few Slido questions. So get your phones ready. We're going to have you pull those out in a few minutes. We're going to talk about a few things. But first things first, let's talk about some of the big numbers from this last legislative session. 940 bill files open. 591 bills passed. So little exercise really quick. Everybody put up both your hands. Everybody put them up, 2 hands up. Now, I don't care who, but like half of you put 1 hand down. Okay, that's how many bill files were open. Look around the room. Just to give you some perspective, this is how many bill files were open. Now, I didn't say put your hands down. Now everybody keep 1 hand up. That's how many bills passed. Again, just for some perspective, That's roughly how many bills passed. If every one of you was a bill and sang your own little bill song, then 10 of you would have not got it through based on the numbers, okay? So a lot of legislation was drafted, a lot of bills passed this year, and we tracked about 26.3, when I say about, we tracked 26.3% of those bills. So thank you all for your attendance at LPC. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of things that happened, and really couldn't get through all this without you. Now, Mayor Walker mentioned this. We had a lot of meetings. Had meetings with the Speaker, had meetings with the President of the Senate, had meetings with the Governor. So here you see board staff plus a few where we went to talk to the Governor about housing. We hear from other states when they talk about how they work with the governor, how they work with the legislature. Other leagues aren't really even on speaking terms in some points. And we're having regular meetings with the governor's office, talking with his staff on a regular basis. We talk to them weekly during the legislative session. So to our executive board members, to the board members, for all the extra work you do, all the meetings that we make you go to, thank you for that. So as we talked about housing, we had some key principles this year that we took to the Commission on Housing Affordability, to the UEOC, things that we ran through the LPC. We've talked about these before, but these really became talking points not just for us, but became talking points for much of the discussion around housing this year. So we've been in a position where we're able to drive, like Mayor Walker said, some of the discussion going on. Now, it doesn't mean we're always getting what we wanted, but we are hearing a lot of our talking points come back as regular things. So we asked you last year, what are the things that we want to accomplish this year? What are things that we're worried about? What are the things that we want to prepare for? And we got your feedback, and we turned your feedback into these cool bubbles. We also did other things with it, not just put it on a slide. But there was a lot that happened. So just so you know, we're listening to the feedback. We're helping it inform what we do. We have a few more questions we want to ask you. So we're going to get your phones out. We're going to jump to Slido. And here you go. You can either get the QR code or go to slido.com and put in the number 1555391. And we're going to ask a couple of questions to get you going. So let's, don't worry, the QR code sticks up there. I'm going to give you about 15 more seconds. All right. So tell us, what is your favorite Winter Olympic event? Since we're talking about the Winter Olympics, what is your favorite Winter Olympic events? We don't care about those Summer Olympic events. Those are for other cities to deal with. But what are your favorite Winter Olympic events? We're going to talk a little bit later. A little spoiler, we have some pictures of the league staff and what we were doing during the last Olympics. Like Liam was, I don't know, were you born yet? Maybe. I actually was old enough to have worked during the Olympics. I was in college at the U. It was really exciting because they shut down the campus during the Olympics, if anybody else was up there at that time. I had a job working for Chevy, actually. They were a big sponsor of the Olympics, and we had a stage in Park City where we'd have all the Olympic athletes come up. After they won their medals, we got to talk about all the things that were exciting. I got to meet a lot of people. I almost killed Chrissy Yamaguchi with an umbrella one time. She's fine, though. But the Olympics are exciting, so yeah, what do people like here? Ski jump, ice skating, is that one event? Because that would be exciting. Volunteer watching. Also a good event, I could medal in that one. All right, now that we've got your attention, let's jump on to a couple other questions here. All right, talk about the NHL team coming to Utah. What should Utah NHL team be named? Looking for suggestions. Cutthroats, curling, polka, yetis, arches, the mule donkeys, cricket stompers. Some of you should not be in marketing. The cactus sliders. Okay. The Jerusalem. These are truly horrible names. Thank you all for your suggestions. I'm sure these are all going to be considered. All right, let's jump on to something maybe a little bit more substantive. although that was great. How did you engage with ULCT during the 2024 legislative session? We like to take a lot of opportunities to check in with you as our members. So curious, what did you do? How did you participate? Did you attend LPC? Did you read the nightly ECAP emails? And now you're going to change the order, so I'm not going to read through them anymore. But tell us, how did you engage with us during the legislative session? Like we said, we had record attendance at LPC meetings, so for those of you who checked in with us every week, thank you for that. I wish I could ignore the legislative session. Don't we all? All right, we're going to give that one about no more time. Let's jump to the next question. And finally, how often did you meet with your state legislators during the session? Not all year round, just curious how often you met during the session. Now, if you have not been meeting with your legislators on a regular basis, that's okay. It is campaign season. Legislators are out there campaigning, and do you know what legislators really like to do when they're campaigning? Talk to people, especially people who might vote for them. So if you have not talked to your legislators recently, now is a great time for you to reach out and talk to them. Ask them what they're going to do for your city, how they're going to help us out, what they're going to do. But this is a great time to get those contacts with your legislators. We talk about this a lot, but getting those contacts before session is so much more useful than just reaching out during session with a really angry text as your introduction. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't reach out during the legislative session if you haven't reached out yet, but if you haven't talked to your legislators recently, this is a great time to do it while they're out there wanting to talk to people. All right, 1 to 2 times during the session. That's great. All right, we're going to jump off of Slido and talk about a few more things that happened during the legislative session. All right, there we go. Slides are working. So this is where we were at, where we started and where we ended. Pre-session, we were anxious, we were worried, we were perturbated about a lot of different things. We were worried that we're going to get potential state mandates. We were worried about residential density. We were worried about penalties on cities, gravel pit preemptions. And where we ended up was not quite so bad. We ended up with a lot of partnership, less preemption. We had a lot more recognition of our efforts. Mayor Walker mentioned this, but I do want to foot stomp a little bit. Data that we collected from you, numbers and talking points that we got from you, we've been pushing up there for a couple years. The entitled units is one. We hear a lot of people bringing that number back to us as if it's a fait accompli. It's just done. It's there. It's accepted and just part of the conversation. So the data and the information we get from you is making a big difference while we're up there on the hill. It wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. So talking about some of the specific areas, instead of some of the preemption and loss of zoning perhaps, we have new housing products in modular housing. We have new financing tools. These aren't required tools. These aren't things you have to do, but there's financing tools that are out there that we hope or could potentially move the needle. And then we had some process updates. So if there's a tool that you need, let us know and we can work on it. Also, if you get asked to use one of these tools, if someone comes up to you and says, I would really like to start a hops or a fizz, and I don't mean the soda shop or a brewery, but if you get asked to start one of these, please let us know, because we do want to know if these are getting used and the difference they're making. So a couple of quotes from some of the state leaders here. So there's been headlines around this, and we have things from Speaker Schultz, who said, I've been told by several cities they're actually excited about some of these things, he said. And he acknowledged that though there are new tools and strategies, it remains to be seen where they will eventually help solve Utah's housing crisis. Now that might not seem like much, that might seem like hedging, but it's important that state leaders are starting to recognize we do need to give time for things to work. That was also something we heard back from several of our leaders this last year, is we need to see if what we're doing is making any difference. And we're seeing a little bit more of an appetite to see if things will make a difference. So again, if these tools are being used in your city, if these things are moving forward, please let us know. That will help us track that as we move forward on other things. And this is another quote when they're looking at Utah's new housing experiment. The developers have to build a lower margin project. They have to build something they're not going to make as much money on. This is coming from Steve Waldrop, who will be up here tomorrow, the governor's housing czar. He has a longer title, but housing czar is easier. And the cities have to upzone a little bit more in order to make those starter homes affordable. The idea is everybody comes in a little bit and meets in the middle in order to achieve a common goal. So recognizing that it's not just us, it's not just the cities who have to do one thing to make this happen, but people are going to have to come to the table if we want to get more affordable housing. Now, we're going to play a clip here. I don't know if Representative Musselman was just feeling particularly loquacious on this occasion or if he had just planned to say things, but we got some really great compliments from the House floor as we're talking about some of these housing bills. So we'll roll that clip.
Again, Speaker, without overdoing it, maybe I am overdoing it, but I do think the municipalities need to recognize that and I think this body respects them and all that they've done and the work that they've gone through in order to help and alleviate the need that we have for housing. And this is another item that they've shown the willingness through the league to negotiate and find a good outcome. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
All right, so that was part of what he said. Yeah, you can clap for that. That's fine. That's exciting. So this was on the near the end of the session. This was on the residential inspection bill, but Representative Musselman had also worked on the fizz and the hops and a lot of these and kind of quarterbacked some of that in the House. But so he was recognizing a lot of the work that had been done by you, a lot of the work that had been done collectively, and that was nice to hear. We were getting some praise and getting some feedback and getting some recognition of the things that we had done. Now, of course, the question we always have is, are we ever going to stop talking about housing or, insert whatever else? But no, probably not for a while, because this is a big deal, not just here, but this is getting national attention. This is getting headlines here in Utah. You can see on the other side, this is getting headlines in other states. The governors are going to their conventions and their conferences and talking about what are you doing in your state to deal with the affordable housing crisis. So this is a problem everywhere, and we suspect we're going to keep talking about it. In fact, not even just suspect, we know it's coming. So again, this is why we want to keep collecting data. We need to keep hearing back from you. Let us know what is working in your cities. Let us know what's not working. So with that, couple comments on session themes, things we learned this last session. And some of these aren't going to be a surprise. Some of these are things that come up a lot. But some of these that we're going to highlight are some of the things we've heard recently. One, we mentioned this partnership, not preemption, is working most of the time as a talking point. It's not always working. It's not perfect. But we are getting more of a feel of partnership, not preemption. We're competing with a lot of other groups who are working in this space. We're hearing, Carson's going to talk about this just a little bit. Because it is the topic du jour, we're having a lot of discussions around this from a lot of groups, but our talking points are coming up there. We are really successful when we are a policy shop. When we have our data and our expertise, that sets us apart from a lot of the anecdotes, a lot of the noise we hear from other places. So we're going to say this over and over, but thank you, one, for responding to our requests, and please keep sending in that data. That makes a massive difference, and it truly is what sets us apart compared to a lot of other groups. And again, we're getting some recognition. This past year, the state doesn't have a surplus, and neither do we, did actually help us. Last year, I don't know if anyone remembers this slide, but there was a slide where we showed how much unfunded mandates could have been out there. And this year, we really didn't even need to put anything like that together because the message was resonating. I want to spend a second on this one, and by a second, I mean like 60 seconds. It is getting harder to kill bills. 591 bills this last year. Remember, everyone in this room is a bill. You all got through. Congrats. Getting harder and harder to kill those bills. We're seeing legislators being more and more deferential to one another on their bills. In committee, where bills used to just sometimes die, now some still do, we see bills get held once or twice and then get out of the committee. Bills don't usually get held twice and then get out of a committee. That is a new kind of phenomenon. If a legislator is willing to keep working on a bill, their colleagues are willing to keep working with them. That has been happening this year, and that is making it difficult. So one of the questions we get often is, why do we have to negotiate on things? It's because if we don't, it's going to move forward anyway. A lot of times we're trying to make really bad bills less bad. We're trying to neuter as far as we can, but it gets more and more difficult. So it's harder to kill bills, and I want to jump down to this last one because we need your help on this one. It is not a major problem, but it could be if we're not careful. We need to be careful that we don't work against ourselves. So what do I mean by that? I mean, all of us mean well, all the time, probably. But sometimes you have folks in your offices, you have folks in your cities who have expertise in a certain subject. They know what's going on in something, and they see a bill, and without talking to whoever your legislative person is, without talking to someone else, they just start reaching out to legislators. We've had this with a couple of different groups this last session, where we found out one group, kind of affiliate group made up of city officials, were in favor of a bill that as a league, and I think as a majority of cities, we were very much against. We found out some other groups were reaching out and saying, hey, we love a bill that the rest of us really did not like. So here's what I'm asking. Figure out who in your cities is going to be your legislative liaison, who's going to be kind of running point on things, who your LPC members are, whoever that is, and then make sure all your staff in your city know that things need to run through that person, or those people, whoever it is. Because the other thing that we're hearing is that when a legislator goes and talks to someone in a city, anyone in a city, if it's the person blowing leaves on the sidewalk, said, well, I talked to a guy in the city, and they are fine with this. We hear that. They say, we talked to someone in the city and they are fine with this bill, or we talked to someone in the city and they hate this idea. They didn't necessarily talk to the right person in the city. So what we're asking for your help in is make sure people are coordinating with you, coordinating with the right people in your city when they're going to engage in the legislative space. We want people engaged in this space. We need the help. We want the expertise. We just want to make sure we're coordinated on it when we're doing that. Last couple of themes here, run through really quickly. ULCT is the tip of the spear on a lot of these negotiations. We're carrying the water sometimes for other groups. Other groups are running things through us to make sure things get done. So one, it's a compliment that our staff gets that we're working on these things, but we need to be aware that we're out in front in a lot of this too. Data does matter, we've hit that. And finally, we've talked about our themes. And then finally, this is a troubling trend. There's the trend of the state authority doing municipal functions or interfering with municipal functions. So we've seen this from the inland port to MIDA, et cetera. We're seeing more and more of these things happening. And so we need to look at how we're going to deal with this going forward, make sure that we're on the same page with this. So just quick interim preview. Our first LPC of the season is going to be on May 20th. That's not on here, I'm just saying it. So if you want to put that on your calendar, if you're doing LPC, May 20th, that Monday, we'll have our LPC, and then we will not have LPC again until August, but we plan to ask for help with work groups to give you a preview of what we know out of interim study and out of the LPC. But that's coming up. But a lot of these things, we're going to be out and about in the different AGOs. We're going to be talking about all the things that are coming up. But nothing on the list should be particularly surprising. It's the same subjects we're dealing with all the time. But please, we need your help. We need all of that. And just thank you all so much for the help that you give us. Like we said, we really could not do this without you. The strength of the league is you. And another strength of the league, as we said, is all of our data. So kicking it over to Carson Eilers to come talk to us about data and how we use it.
All right, who's tired of hearing about data in Slido? Wow, no hands. I don't believe that, but I appreciate it. Oops, I want to go back one. There we go. So I really wanted to talk about how we being league staff, we being the league board of directors and the policy committee, have really made a concerted effort to incorporate data into both our advocacy and our decision making. You've heard both Mayor Walker, you heard Justin allude to it, and if any of you went to the data workshop earlier, you heard it there as well. But it's really a strategic effort that we're trying to make to modernize our legislative efforts and to stay ahead of some of the anecdotes that we're hearing. One of our key tools for doing that is Slido. You've heard that over and over again. You all participated in it, but I cannot stress enough how essential this tool has been to informing the board advocacy, to informing staff advocacy, because it really is critical. We began using Slido just last year. We did some surveying beyond that, but Slido was really that first time that we started using that tool for quick touch points during the session. This past year, we've tried to take some of your feedback to make sure we're focus grouping questions, to make sure our questions are refined, to make sure that we're asking the right thing that you can actually answer. And we're trying to be more restrained, believe it or not, and ask fewer questions so we don't have quite as much fatigue and you aren't quite as annoyed with us during LPC meetings. And this year, you participated more and you responded more. We had almost 3,000 responses in 26 questions during this past session, which I really applaud you all for, because I know it takes time. I know you're also frantically texting some of your staff sometimes trying to figure out what on earth we're asking for and how to get that. So I know it's a lot of work on your part too, and we really, really appreciate it. But I want to give you an example of how this tool actually helps inform policy, because sometimes you fill out the form on your phone, you see us up there, but here's how this actually works. So HB 306 is a great example. This is a bill that would have preempted residential zoning in about 75 cities, or about a third of our membership. We have a standing, our bylaws require us to not take formal positions on policy concepts until they're actually in public legislation. This leaves us a little bit of a challenge, because we have standing policy, we have resolutions that you've all adopted, but we only have so many of those. We have policy topics every year ranging from animal control to zoos and everything in between. So we only have so many standing resolutions, and what we started doing is using Slido to fill in that gap. So on this particular bill, again, we knew our resolutions gave us some framework. We knew that we'd have concerns about it, so we brought it to the LPC. We first expressed our concerns to the bill sponsor, who asked us, he didn't have a bill yet, but he wanted to get our feedback. So we brought it to the LPC. He refined his concepts a little bit based on that feedback. You were still all very concerned. We expected that, but this confirmed that, and this gave us actual proof to say, look, it's not just us as staff saying it. This is city officials who are really concerned about what this policy means for their community and their ability to plan for infrastructure. The bill sponsor said, okay, appreciate the feedback. He brought back another concept. Again, not in bill form, just a policy concept, which we brought back. I think this was, it started as Rumor 2 and then became Rumbling 5 at some point. There was a couple of those. But again, we used your feedback to actually guide this policy direction. Once the bill was numbered during the session, the LPC formally voted to oppose it. But we ended up with a very different bill than where we started with in the fall, and that was because of your feedback through Slido. We decided a lot of other topics ranging from parking, gravel pits, water conservation, pretty much everything in between. You all filled them out. I don't have to revise them too much, but again, I gave you the example on 306, but your feedback was helping inform policy behind the scenes on each of these topics. And I want to talk a little bit about the advocacy side of things, how we're using data to help inform decision-making and help inform elected officials. There's been a lot more groups in the housing policy space in recent years. As Justin mentioned, it's been kind of the headline-grabbing topic. It's very much on the public minds. Public opinion survey repeatedly says that. And because of that, you have more groups involved. Some of these groups have always been involved in this space to some extent, and some of them are brand new. What this means is there's more studies, there's more recommendations, there's more policy formulation. Some of it's helpful, some of it's maybe not helpful for municipalities, but it's all happening and it's all increasing at scale. But because of the information you give us, we are able to figure out what's helpful, what's accurate, what's anecdote, what's rumor, and kind of distinguish between the two, and then report back to state policymakers. So you've heard the anecdote multiple times, but we always hear the story that cities are not planning for growth. We hear the story that cities don't care about housing, or that they're just being difficult. I think that the data says otherwise. We have 155,000 building permits in the last 5-ish years. That was prior to 2024 when we don't have as updated data. So in that 5-year span, 155 housing units permitted. That means you're planning for infrastructure for all of those. That means you're processing applications. That's a lot of work to enable that. Additionally, we had Senate Bill 185 this last year, which would have preempted all of your building inspection authority off the get-go. That bill ended in a much better place because, I don't know where Seth is, but Seth Perrins, our liaison with the Utah City Managers Association, worked with us to create a quick survey. It was a lot of work to fill out. I know some of the city managers are still kind of frustrated about that survey, but we asked for kind of a broad scope. We asked for all the inspections that those cities have done in that time. We asked them for how long it took them from the date requested to the date the inspection was completed. And what we found was 99% of inspections were completed within 3 business days of the day requested. That's the statutory parameters, and that was a really powerful number. That changed the scope of that whole bill and the whole conversation. Lastly, you heard the 190,000 entitled unit number. This was a survey that we conducted last year as a follow-up from the prior year, but this was a really critical number in changing the conversation. This shows that cities are not only actively working to plan for housing, but you're planning for the future housing. You're planning for the infrastructure to enable that. These entitled units have a legal right to be built, but it also means you have to figure out where the water pipes are going to go. It means you have to figure out where the roads are going to go and how we're going to get to that point. Research doesn't stop there. Sometimes I wish it did, but it's always a continued battle. So this year, we really want to focus on things like infrastructure funding and how we can make sure that that's sustainable, not just in the near future, but when we have the Olympics in 2060 again. So that's really critical. We know Utah cities, not counties, not state, Utah cities are responsible for about 12,000 weighted lane miles. That's enough to span half the circumference of the Earth. As we talk about growth, you have to figure out not only how you're going to replace existing roads and repair existing roads, but plan for whatever capacity you need to get to, 5.5 million people by 2060? And that's just the start. We've got a number of other surveys up there that are kind of recurring. And lastly, before I turn it back over to Cam, I want to mention our legislative recap. This is a document that it's now published. It's on our website. It doesn't look quite as good on mobile yet. We're still working on that a little bit, but all the resources are there. Go do it on your computer, ulct.org/wrap. We've summarized, I believe it's 67 bills in various level of detail. We flagged what you need to change in your code if there's action required. We flagged bills that might require review for compliance. And we've got as much detail as we can cram into that document. On that same page, there's about 4 hours of spring training videos and more slides than I care to count that will help you implement all of the new legislation that was passed this year. So with that, I thank you for your time. I'll turn it over to Cameron to talk about the Olympics, and which is a little bit more fun than legislation.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Carson. Thank you to Mayor Walker, and thank you to all of you for taking time away from your family, your day jobs, your night jobs, your civic responsibilities, friends, and everyone else to join us in St. George for a couple of days. I appreciate the kind words that Mayor Walker said, but it really is a team effort. It's a collective effort from everybody in this room. It's a collective effort from the League Board of Directors and the League staff. And I want to publicly thank, you heard from Justin, our Deputy Director, you heard from Carson, our Policy Director. You'll hear from Molly Wheeler, our Deputy Director, tomorrow. But in addition to those 3, I want to thank Jared and Liam and Katie and Cassidy and Angela, Meg, Roger, and Todd, who are all part of the League team. I also want to thank Nick Jarvis, who's our Chief Financial Officer, who keeps all the trains running on time for us. But while the League staff is up at the Capitol, our legislative team is up at the Capitol, you have Nick and Katie and Cassidy and Angela and Meg and others who are working to get this conference ready to go so we can leave the Capitol and come to St. George. So please join me in thanking all of them for their tremendous work. Thank you also to Mayor Kafusi, who you heard from this morning, to Mayor Walker, who chaired the Policy Committee, and to the League Board of Directors. There are 21 mayors and council members from all corners of the state who are there representing you and working with us, in addition to Seth Perrins, who represents the City Management Association, and then Pam Spencer from the Municipal Clerks Association, who meet and dedicate significant time throughout the off-season, laying out the principles and the foundation for our advocacy work and our engagement. And then you responded by speaking up. Mayor Kafusi issued that challenge in the fall, and you responded in kind, and so I salute you as well. You heard Justin talk about all of the attention around housing policy, and he showed a couple of headlines, but not a day goes by, including today, without some sort of headline in a local or national publication about what's going on with the housing crisis around the country. Utah's not alone in dealing with this challenge. What's been gratifying over the last few weeks is to see the number of national publications that are showing the type of collaborative work that we've done in Utah over the last few years. In fact, the session ended on March 1st, And part of the reason I know it ended on March 1st is because my daughters have a paper chain. Some of you have seen pictures of it, but they have a paper chain where they track each day of the legislative session. And so they were counting down the days until the legislative session ended on March 1st. Well, on March 1st, the session ended. On March 5th, Governor Cox was actually presenting with governors around the country on housing policy, and all the different governors were bringing feedback about what was happening in their states. And then the following week, quite a few of us were in Washington, D.C. with the National League of Cities, and we as a Utah League were presenting to our colleagues around the country about what was happening here. And what we're seeing around the country is a lot of state preemption and a lot of efforts by the state to take over and take away the authority of local governments. And what we've been seeing here over particularly the last couple of years is just the spirit of collaboration and partnership, not preemption. And it's gratifying to see these national headlines where you have Governor Cox in his role as chair of the Governors Association talking about how we've collaborated to do hard things together here and really demonstrate how we can disagree better, but also move the needle in positive ways. So I think we as a league and we as local governments and we as Utah leaders have a good story to tell. We'll also have a good story to tell because of our Olympic legacy here. And we've talked a little bit about that so far today, but let's talk about it a little further. So that video clip was from League staffer Cassidy Hansen's elementary school, McKinley Elementary in Tremonton. Where are you, Tremonton? I know I saw you earlier. Yep. So that was from her elementary school. I won't ask you how old you were in 2002, but Cassidy was in elementary school at McKinley. But League staff, you heard Justin's story. There's Molly in downtown Salt Lake. You'll hear from Molly tomorrow. And that's me trying to do a Karl Malone-style dunk. You guys remember that dunk? I was trying to do that dunk while I was a missionary in Mexico. So I missed the Olympics. I missed them. Now, I did finagle my way into somebody's house who had satellite TV so I could watch the opening ceremonies. I don't regret that at all. So I selfishly want the Olympics to come back so I can experience them. But most league staff was here. So you can see Carson with the mascot bear, and you can see Cassidy from our elementary school, and then that's a stand-in for Liam because Liam wasn't living in Utah, so he wasn't here, but we wanted to include him. That's some random kid from the governor's office website. But part of the reason we wanted to include Liam is because Liam wasn't living here. But how many people in this room were living here in 2002? Okay, a lot of us. But now how many of you were not living here in 2002? Okay, a decent number, and a good number of Utahns have come since 2002. Well, those of us who are living here will never forget this day. I remember it because it was actually my birthday in 1995 when the Olympics were announced, and thankfully I kept a bunch of old newspapers from when I was young, and so I asked my dad to go through some boxes, and he found it. It was great. But that's the headline of when we were awarded the Olympic Games in 1995. Well, as I was looking through those old newspapers he found for me, I was interested in the public support. This is Deseret News that shows the public support for the Olympics from 1989 through 1995, and it always fluctuated, always above 50%, but fluctuating between there and 76%, okay? Well, the Deseret News did a survey, this is from 2022, a couple years ago, but still, 79% of Utahns approve of hosting the Winter Olympics again. So an even higher number than the first time. To me, that is inspiring, that we have a higher number of Utahns that want to bring it back. We want to run it back. We want that experience again. It's hard for 79% of anybody to agree on anything, but one thing Utahns can agree on is we want to bring the Olympics back. Well, we got the games in 1995. The games were in 2002, and it wasn't long after we were awarded the games in 1995 that the debate started about what came next. And when I say debates, I mean them literally, because the junior high debate resolution in 1995-1996 had this topic: be it resolved that the state of Utah should implement a program to substantially decrease traffic congestion prior to the 2002 Winter Olympics. Now, I know some of you are thinking, like, how on earth does he know what the 1995-96 Utah Junior High Debate Resolution is? That's because I have my debate binder from when I was in junior high on this very topic, okay? Of course I do, right, okay? So let's talk about some of the arguments that the teenagers were making back in 1995, 1996. And tell me if these sound familiar. So this is from December of 1995. There was a question asked to the public, how would you pay for improvements to I-15? Because that was obviously necessary in order to accommodate the Olympics. Now remember, 63% of Utahns wanted the Olympics. Okay? 63% wanted the Olympics shortly before we got them. So this is survey data just a few months later from my trusty junior high debate binder. Only 41% supported a statewide gas tax increase. 23% supported a Wasatch Front-only gas tax increase. 19% supported a sales tax increase to expand I-15. So tell me if this sounds familiar. We want the Olympics, but we're not sure we want to pay for the infrastructure to support the Olympics, right? Okay, another interesting card here. This was about telecommuting, and this data, also from December of 1995, currently, quote, there are 40 state employees telecommuting. 40. The goal by the Olympics is to have 425 state employees telecommute. Okay, so that's a tenfold increase. That's great. How many people in here telecommute at least one day a week now? I was actually expecting that number to be much higher. That's a lesson about not asking a question you don't know the answer to. But from a state perspective, thousands of state employees now telecommute at least one day a week. In other words, the world has changed to a degree that we didn't really contemplate in 1995 because they were thinking from 40 to 425. Okay, one more card, although I geeked out on this hard when I found this binder. And if anybody wants to look through it in more detail, you can. I'm even using the same cheat sheet that I used when I was 14 to navigate my binder here. Okay, one more thing from 1995. The state's top highway administrator, Tom Morgie, said that, quote, we have a prevalent 2002 mentality that places preparations for the Olympics ahead of longer-term issues. And he said, quote, has anybody uttered the date 2003? He said the whole widening of I-15 from 6 to 10 lanes, which as somebody who got his driver's license during that time, I stayed away from that, the Levitt Luge, right? But widening 6 to 10 lanes between Sandy and downtown Salt Lake will only begin to solve the growing traffic problems along the Wasatch Front. So the good news is the state policymakers in 1995 were trying to figure out not just how do we host the games in 2002, but what does it mean in 2003, and what does it mean beyond? So let's visualize this for a second. How many people remember when light rail first opened? Yeah, quite a few. Like I was there, I grew up in Murray, and it was super exciting to see the light rail come through. So when we found this old graphic that was part of those newspaper archives I referenced, a few things really struck me. One, in that picture, you just have what is now the part of the red line and the blue line, but you also see a lot of gaps between cities. Like, we got a great shout out to Eagle Mountain and Saratoga Springs earlier today, but in 1995, there wasn't an Eagle Mountain or Saratoga Springs, right? You can see that here on the map. Sorry, Davis County folks, the map was looking south rather than north, but you get the point, right? The region has blossomed and grown significantly. In fact, you went from the track system that was built for the Olympics to the robust tracks, Frontrunner and BRT system that we have today. That took the investment and the vision that the Olympics was a catalyst for, but it wasn't just because of the Olympics. So yes, we pay more in gas tax now. Yes, we pay more in sales tax now. Yes, because of the investments made 30 years ago, we still have a tremendous quality of life, even as the metropolitan areas have grown. But it took that vision and it took that investment. The world has also changed. Some of you may remember these cards about how to get from point A to point B during the Olympics. Well, now we won't be passing these cards out in 2034. It'll all be on your app of how to get from point A to point B. And so the world has changed. And here's just a simple visual of it. Can we play the video here as we watch Salt Lake County grow? So watch not just the southwest part of the valley, but watch the green spaces fill in. is the time warp of about 25 years worth of growth in Salt Lake County. So Salt Lake County looks different, but so does the whole region. So if we go back, we can take a look at another part of the state where we are right now in Washington County. So this first picture, well, yes, that first picture, again, satellite image of what the region looked like in 2002 versus what the region looks like now in 2024. And I was talking with Mayor Hart about this from Ivins, and I was telling him how staggering this was, and he just looked at me with basically a duh. He's lived it, right? All the mayors in St. George and Washington and Santa Clara and Hurricane, you've all lived this. You've all lived this growth. Downtown Salt Lake looked like this during the Winter Olympics. Well, fast forward to February of 2022 and February of 2023, and downtown Salt Lake looks different, whether it's the construction of Temple Square, or those are my daughters sitting on the Sky Bridge looking down Main Street, and the Eccles Theater wasn't there in 2002. City Creek Development wasn't there. They love watching the tracks trains come, and downtown Salt Lake looks different today than it did then. Well, what's great about the Olympics, when you look back on 2002, and now as we prepare for what hopefully will be a celebration on Pioneer Day this summer, is what will our cities and towns look like in 2034? And what are we doing now as city and town leaders to plan for 2034 and beyond? And this is going to look different if you're Park City or if you're Castledale. It's going to look different if you're Gunnison or if you are Murray. But everybody needs to, as part of your ability to put your fingerprint on history, what are we doing now that will set us up for success with the Olympics, but will also set the state up for success and preserve the quality of life that we all enjoy today. Now, what's exciting about the Olympic conversation is the collaborative approach that we're seeing from state leaders. You heard it from Fraser Bullock this morning. He sends his regrets. He wanted to join in person, but he's in New York meeting with IOC officials. So when we asked if he would do a video, he jumped at it, and you saw him ask you for ideas of how do we connect the Olympics to all 255 cities and towns in the state, across the state. And we have a decade to prepare for that. So you have an Olympic committee that has reached out to us. Mayor Kafusi, the league president, serves on one of those Olympic committees, and we have city leaders in Salt Lake and Park City and elsewhere who are actively engaged and want all of your communities to have a taste of the Olympics, just like Cassidy's McKinley Elementary did in Tremonton, and just like the rest of the league staff did when we were younger. We've also seen great collaboration from state leaders. I was at an event just a couple of weeks ago where there are two co-chairs of the State Legislative Committee on the Olympics, Representative John Hawkins and Representative Mike McKell. Both of them represent Utah County. Both of them were very collaborative in their comments. In fact, Senator McKell spoke 3 times, or said 3 different times, we need to define what success looks like. And success is going to look a little different today than it did after 2002. So we need to have a conversation as state leaders and business leaders and local government leaders about what success looks like after the games. And on 3 separate occasions, he said we need to be engaging with the League of Cities and Towns and with mayors and council members to figure out what success looks like. And it was actually, I thought, a very humble approach from a state leader to say, I'm not sure what success looks like yet, but we have to have this conversation as a state of what success looks like so that everybody feels invested in the games, but also invested in whatever comes later. So that whoever those teenagers are over the next decade that are doing whatever teenagers do instead of debate binders nowadays, and they're talking about how state leaders are preparing, 30 years from now we can look back and say, check, 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 you made a difference for the quality of life of Utahns. Well, part of that discussion will happen here at the league conference. So the hallway conversations have been terrific, the workshops have been terrific, but over the rest of the afternoon we're going to break up into our caucus meetings. And when we break up into caucuses here, we actually have 6 different caucuses. That's an increase from the normal 5. But we're going to ask you initially via Slido when you walk in. We'll ask you electronically these first 2 questions about the biggest challenges your city and town's facing and what you wish state leaders knew about what's happening in your city and town. And then we want to have this discussion about these potential approaches to address these challenges. And yes, we need to think about now, and no, we always have to be thinking about the next legislative session because the legislative advocacy is year-round. While I was sitting here, I got an update about the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission that's going to start up in the next couple of weeks. And so the advocacy is year-round. And so we are tasked to think about both the here and now and then also thinking about 10 years into the future. And so we want to spur this sort of discussion. And let me give you a couple of examples of where this discussion makes a difference. Several years ago, there was a conversation between Mayor Staley from Goshen and me about the need for small communities to have additional administrative support. Additionally, conversations were happening with R6, formerly 6 County Association of Governments, about the very same topic, about how do we help small communities that don't have full-time staff or very little full-time staff. Well, a conversation here and a conversation there and a conversation here and a conversation there led to eventually the passage of the Local Administrative Advisor Program last year, the first of its kind program in the country. By a quick show of hands, how many of your cities and towns have used the Local Administrative Advisor in its first 8 months? By show of hands, raise them high because it's actually really bright up here. Okay, so quite a few. So this is a program designed for communities under 5,000 in population and that don't have full-time administrative staff. And it's a demonstration of the partnership between the governor, the legislature, and local governments say, here's a need, and then how do we address this need? And we have some of those local administrative advisors that are housed at the AOGs here at the conference with us. So if you're unfamiliar with the program and you're a community that would qualify, we have an Ask Me Anything booth at the registration desk. Make sure you come find Liam and make sure you talk to those involved in the Local Administrative Advisor Program. But then conversations around increasing transit service or local control and everything in between often comes out of these caucus conversations. So after we take the break, please come prepared to have that conversation, and we as staff track everything and report it back to the board for them to ultimately prioritize how we spend our time between now and the next legislative session. Thankfully, my daughters have not started a paper chain between now and the next session. That paper chain comes in January, and it does make those long days of winter go by faster. So speaking of that, what comes next? You can see that we have several regional meetings in partnership with 5 County AOG, with R6, with CERTA and Price, with Bear River Association of Governments in Brigham City, where we're trying to provide regional trainings around the state. Thank you for your financial support of the league that helps us build out these programs. And I want to publicly thank R6, formerly known as, the artist formerly known as the 6 County Association of Governments, because they did a regional summit where they brought together mayors, council members, county commissioners a couple of years ago, and it was phenomenal. And we're trying to basically take that model and do it around the state, and to make sure that we as a league are aware of, cognizant of the needs of our communities around the state and advocating for your needs at the Capitol. And then the advocacy space. You heard Justin reference that it's an election year. Well, it is an election year, which is a great opportunity for you to engage with legislators. If you're unsure how to do it, if it feels a little scary, you're not sure what to do, contact us. We're happy to connect you with legislators. We talk to legislators all the time, and really, we just need you to engage in storytelling. Speak up, right, Mayor Capuzzi? Speak up and tell your story of what your community does, and then legislative interim gets up and running. If nothing else, just make sure you sign up for Friday Facts and make sure you have our email addresses so you can reach out to us. Thank you for your community service and your involvement in the league. It really is an honor for all of us at the league to serve you and to represent you at the Capitol and to help you serve your communities. We say it all the time, but we mean it. The strength of the league really is you, the membership. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this week. Thank you for your service to your communities, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, everyone.